Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hi, Red Laughlin here. We're on the Corner Bookstore today on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. And today I'm super honored to have an author who's written over 24 books and has both mastered the nonfiction and fiction end of our world. So with that, Mark Leslie, Canadian author, coach, speaker, please join us.
Is it okay if I brought a friend?
Absolutely.
Awesome. York comes with me to a lot of places. We get all philosophical together sometimes.
Alas,
all three of us have the same hairstyle too, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Okay, 20 years ago, you wrote a book, One Hand Screaming.
Yeah.
As your first venture into contemporary horror, chilling tales, paranormal, psychological suspense, all those words that describe that genre. But you've done something, and 20 years later, you have upgraded, expanded, inserted new material. So tell us a little bit about why you did that and what it actually is.
Yeah, of course. Started off in the early days of writing and publishing, and the going wisdom was you would write a story and you would send it to a magazine or a market or whatever. And the point was, and again, this was back in the typewriter days, so it was mailing manuscripts away. The email wasn't a thing. The internet was still 20, 30 years away. And you would build a name for yourself by selling your stories to markets. And as a horror writer, I started to sell stories. I sold my very first short story in 1992. And over the years, I amassed thousands of rejection slips, but I'd slowly started to get my work published in small press magazines. And that was that was to get to that next phase of getting an editor or an agent to pay attention to you for a book deal. Well, I was working in the book industry since 1992 as well. And I was so frustrated that I had dozens of stories published, but I didn't actually have anything in a book. Like the magazine was only available for a limited time period, maybe, for 1 month or 6 months or whatever. And then it was off the shelves. And so what I did is in 2004, I collected a bunch of my previously published stories and I put them together in this relatively thin volume. It was only 140 pages called One Hand Screaming. And again, horror collection, single author, and very, very thin, as you can see. And I self-published it. So this was in 2004, before self-publishing was easy. This was a print-on-demand title. Ebooks weren't even an option for independent authors at the time, and made it available, just distributed through Ingram to make it available to bookstores, etc. And that was the very first book I published. And so, as the 20th anniversary of this, seminal work for me, the very first book I had out, and I have 35 books published since then, but that was such an important landmark. I wanted to do something special to celebrate the 20th anniversary. So why not release a revised version and include, some of the stories that I published in the last 20 years. So One Hand Screaming, 20 Haunting Years, which technically would be 40 haunting years because I started writing 40 years ago. 20 Haunting Years has all new content. So, it has the original 23 stories. It has an additional 26 stories and poems that have been published in the last 20 years, as well as 11 of them have never before been published anywhere. So they're unique. I commissioned original artwork. So there's some full-page spreads of original horrific artwork to head up each themed section of the book. all new introductions, kind of like a Rod Serling Twilight Zone, where he walks out and introduces the story in a couple lines, and expanded author notes. And the author notes are for readers who just want to know what inspired each of the stories, but writers potentially may even enjoy them because they could get a little insight into the backstory, where this was originally published, and what inspired the story. And so that one's way more than twice the size of the original. And I thought, I'm not just going to leave it at that. I'm not just going to do an expanded edition of the book. Revised cover. I did a Kickstarter for it, which I ran over the summer, where people could get access to additional bonus content that's not going to be available in the book. A faux leather bound, even further expanded edition that has additional material that's not in the regular trade edition. And I even printed enough copies, like a large print run of these, and basically invested in putting them into a distribution warehouse like a traditionally published book. Because I thought, if 20 years ago I was pushing the boundaries, why not push the boundaries even further 20 years later?
Okay, so you have this passion for dark humor and psychological, supernatural in that area, but you also happen to have a very highly developed skill for the nonfiction aspects of writing and publishing. Did that come out because of necessity, or just because of love, or how did you end up in two different markets having a lot of good material?
Well, that's a great question, Red. Thanks for asking. So I always liked paranormal stuff. I always liked speculative fiction, the what if, right? What's hiding in the dark corner? Is there a monster under the bed? What does it want from me? Besides to eat me alive. And I never thought, even though I read a lot of nonfiction books, like UFO books and books about Sasquatch and monsters and ghosts and stuff like that, I loved reading them when I was a kid. I never expected I would do that. It wasn't until I think I was in Ottawa, Canada's the national city, the capital, and I was on a ghost walk, a Victorian garbed actor on the Hamilton or Ottawa ghost walks, and I was just so in awe of the storytelling that went into the ghost walks, because as they're relaying the stories about the various ghosts in downtown Ottawa, they are sharing historic stories, and this was the first time in my life that history came alive. And I always kind of thought of history as boring, perhaps because of the way that it was taught to me in school. But this was the first time that I went, wow, this is amazing. We have such a rich and varied history that we don't really realize, right? One of our prime ministers used to have seances and commune with the dead. Like that's the leader of our country. And that wasn't really a big thing we talked about in history. So when I moved to Hamilton, Ontario, Canada's steel town, I went on a ghost walk to try to get to know a little bit more about the city. And I was so inspired with the local group, I suggested, hey, you guys should write a book. This really great content. And they said, well, we're too busy running this business, but we'll give you access to our files if you want to write a book, and we'll write the introduction for you. And so that Haunted Hamilton was the very first exposure of taking true stories and applying the same storyteller skills into writing those chapters. And of course, 6 other books later, I've continued to write haunted location books. And so I find it really fascinating, because sometimes when I'm researching for a true ghost story book, I may find a story about a ghost, and I may or may not have enough to write a chapter on it, but that could also inspire fiction. So that research that I do for one kind of project can lend itself to another. And in many cases, there's a true story about, a ghost that haunts this museum, for example, in the creepy capital, one of my books about the nation's capital and ghost stories there. And then I adapted that ghost into my fiction as well. So I can kind of double dip, which I think is an important thing for authors to recognize, is you have ideas and IP or intellectual property, and it can come out a few different ways, right? Nonfiction, fiction, even doing talks at local libraries, etc. Like 3 different ways that you can exploit your own IP.
Have you actually run into a ghost?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. For years, I could say I've never seen a ghost. Thank God, because I'd probably have a heart attack and die, or have to change my underwear or whatever. Because I'm a big chicken. I'm one of the world's biggest chickens. But It was a few years ago. Yeah, my now wife and I were traveling through. We were driving back from Florida. We were at a romance writers conference down in Florida, in Orlando, and we were driving back to Ontario, Canada, and I had just released Haunted Hospitals with Rhonda Parrish, my co-author. And on the way back, we were, looking for a spot about halfway, so we could just kind of do the drive in 2 days. And I saw that in Weston, West Virginia, there was the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, which was one of the places that Rhonda wrote about in the book. And so I hadn't really researched it the way she had. I only, looked at and kind of proofread her chapters before we sent that off to our editor at the publisher. And so we stopped in, and Liz and I got a hotel room. It was late at night. It was about 1 a.m. We were tired. We were traveling all day. We get to the first hotel and it's all booked up. And then they say there's another hotel a mile down the highway, and, driving through the mountains in the fog at night, and we're tired, and get to the next hotel. And I run in to see if they have a room, and they say, yeah, but we only have one room available. But it's like 2 double beds. We don't have a queen or a king or anything. And I said, I don't care. We just want to go to sleep because we want to get up, do the tour the next day, and then drive back home. And in the middle of the night, a scary thing happened. Is I woke up and I heard Liz. She was in the bed closest to the bathroom, and I was in the bed closest to the door. In the middle of the night, I woke up and I see Liz. I can hear her feet shuffling, and I see her moving around the side of the bed towards the bathroom. And I'm laying there thinking, okay, it's going to turn the bathroom light on. And I'm waiting and waiting, but the light never turns on. And I thought, oh, that's weird. So I'm just laying there in the dark, and I'm listening, and then I can hear Liz snoring in the bed beside me. And then I thought, oh my God, there's a woman in the room. I just saw a woman walk around the side of our bed, and she's hiding in the bathroom. And I sat up. I was terrified. And then I realized what probably happened. What probably happened is I saw Liz go to the bathroom. I fell asleep while I was laying there, as happens. And maybe 5 minutes passed, but I thought a second had passed. And she's already back in bed. And that's what happened. It was a trick. And then after I finally got back to sleep and realized there was nobody there, I heard a noise. I heard sort of like the noise on the desk at the end. And again, I sat up thinking someone was in the room. So I finally got convinced that I was hearing and seeing things. But then the next day in the morning, when Liz woke up, I said, hey, did you get up at all in the middle of the night? And she goes, no, I never got up once. I was in bed the whole time. And I said, well, that's weird. And I told her what happened. And her face went white. And I said, what? She said, well, I wasn't going to say anything, but she's laying there sleeping in the middle of the night, and she could feel someone standing over her in the middle of the night. And then she felt a hand touch her shoulder, and she knew it wasn't my hand. She said it felt like a woman's hand. She's feisty. So she swung around as if like someone's broke in here. I'm going to hit them. And there was nobody there. So we both experienced seeing or feeling or hearing a woman in the room with us. And I can't explain what it was. So perhaps it was a ghost that we saw.
That's your story, and you're sticking with it, right?
That is my story. And it's funny because Liz is not a believer, right? She likes going on the tours, and she doesn't believe. I'm a big, I'm a sucker for paranormal stuff. And she's like, yeah, I don't believe it. And then she's like, I can't explain this.
My daughter used to work at a prison in Texas. And when she was working outside picket, she had a gun as tall as she's only 4'10", but she has a gun almost as big as me. But she knew ahead of time that everyone who walked that particular part of the prison, there was a ghost they called George, and he loved to feel their hair. And she says more than a few times, many more than a few times, she would feel somebody, running her hair through their fingers, and she'd say, "Knock it off, George," and he would stop for a little bit. And so she kind of got used to George, but then she was inside, and one time she's walking down to like 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's supposed to be asleep. And all of a sudden this convict, inmate, whatever you want to call it, appears in front of her, and she's just about ready to say something or shout something to someone, and he walks through the wall. And
oh my God.
So
okay.
Yeah, so little things like that. But anyway, so there's a lot of non-believers. So there's a lot of people who have never had the opportunity or experience. But anyway, but you were talking earlier about this access to a whole bunch of historical stuff. And
Yeah.
it kind of brought up one of the things I read in doing research on you today. You have it, I think, on your website. If the desire to write is never accompanied by the actual writing, then the desire is not to write, or something like that. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
um, that's kind of profound in many ways. Tell us, why did you decide to include that on your website?
I can't remember where I encountered it. It's a quote from Hugh Prather, and it's from his book Notes to Myself, which is kind of like memoir, journalish, uh, and it just stuck to me. If the desire to write is not accompanied by actual writing, then the desire is not to write. And this is something that happens to so many writers. Is so many writers have these great ideas, they have things they want to do, and then they end up not getting it done. And the reality is, we all have so many different things to deal with. We have so many different aspects of our lives that we have to prioritize. And I always remembered that if I want to actually be a published writer, if I want to actually have books out into the world, I actually have to. I have to bake the bread. I have to make the books. I have to put them into the world if I want to reap the benefits of it. And so that was a reminder to me that if I don't have button chair and fingers on keyboard, I'm not going to have a story to sell, or I'm not going to have a book to sell. And so that quote from Hugh Prather really spoke to me, because it really does come down to, I mean, and you can't edit a blank page, right? So even if that first draft is not good, it doesn't matter. The fact is that you're actually getting stuff. And if you don't get writing, then is it really important to you? And perhaps the desire is not to actually get any writing done. So, I mean, it speaks to me, and I've kept it on my writing space for a long time.
Okay, so you're a writer, obviously an author. You've been involved with editing, you've been involved with marketing, publishing, and you're also kind of a coach and a speaker. It seems like you're
Yeah.
taking advantage of all the different things that an author should consider as potential options for getting credibility, income, speaking. I mean,
Right.
lots of things out there. We write a book, we don't tell anybody about it until we get done. Then all of a sudden we're hoping that we sell things. And then all of a sudden, 5 years later, well, I've sold 37 books. And then you wonder,
Yeah.
why don't people want my, because anyway, so take us back through your history of when you first started writing. What kind of challenges did you have, and how did you overcome some of these and become, let's say, a rung up on the ladder of success?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked, because when I go back to where I grew up in mid northern Ontario, in a small town, we didn't even have a bookstore. It was an hour drive to get into the big city, which was only 90,000 people, where there were bookstores. And our library, which was attached to the public school, the only public school we had there, it closed down in the middle of the summer. So, right, for 2 months, you couldn't get to go to the library. So my access to reading and materials, especially in terms of research in or writers clubs or anything, was very, very limited. And so that's where I had to really step out and above and beyond just listening to the limitations of what I could do. So that was, when we went into Sudbury with my parents, I would get into the bookstores and I would pick up books like Writer's Market or Writer's Digest magazine, where there was lots of helpful tips for writers. I mean, the difference today is that a writer has access to the internet, and even if they don't have a computer at home, they can go to the library and they can access computers to get onto the internet and get access to so much information. So one of the first things I learned was, I mean, it was very limited what I could do. I could sell stories to magazines, I could get some money eventually for them, and get lots of rejections. Now, in the world we live in, there's so many choices and options. And one of the things I often tell writers that they should take advantage of is, remember, you're the creator, you're the generator of the IP and the ideas. You can sell work to publishers and magazines and markets. You can also release that content yourself, and you don't have to pick just one. You can do a little bit of everything. I have worked with, let's see, four or five different traditional publishers to sell my works through them. But I've also self-published a bunch of my stuff. And I've also done stuff like I mentioned in One Hand Screaming. I made money selling this story to a horror magazine. They gave me money. And then a year later, the license or the contract says that the reprint, the reprint rights are they're returned to me. They got first serial rights or first North American rights. And then I can I can sell that reprint to another market, or I can include it in a short story collection. Or if you want to test and you're curious about publishing direct to Amazon on Kindle Direct Publishing, or using a distributor like Draft to Digital to get your ebook out into the world, you can just publish a short story and test it out and see what it's like. And that can remove some of the fear and anxiety. And the other fear and anxiety writers have is, oh my God, people are going to read my work and they're going to judge me, right? And that's one of the biggest hurdles I think writers have to get over, is recognizing, yeah, I have the story, I have these things I want to share. It's okay, once I share them, you're going to encounter people who don't like your work, and you're going to encounter people who like your work, and you're going to encounter people who love your work, and maybe you'll encounter people who hate your work. And I guess fortunately, I cut my teeth on a lot of rejections from a lot of different editors, and then acceptances once in a while. So when I look at today, when I have a book up online and it's listed on Amazon or some other retail website, and I see, okay, I got a 4-star and a 5-star review and somebody really loved it, and then I got another one where it's like, oh, it's a miss. So someone's like, oh my God, this, One Hand Screaming had blood and death and ghosts and stuff, and I hate that stuff. And I was like, well, maybe not your cup of tea. So you're not my audience. And not taking that personally is really hard for writers too.
Well, why don't we do this? You have a book or two there that I asked you to set up as a potential reading option. Why don't you pick something, and let's give people a chance to see what kind of judgment they can make against you today.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll read a couple really short selections from One Hand Screaming, just so people can get a bit of a taste for it. So I'll read that. This is a short poem that I wrote specifically for One Hand Screaming 20 Haunting Years. So it's a poem which is more of a reflection of a writer's life. So any writers who are watching or listening will probably get a charge out of it. It's called 20 Haunting Years. As I stare down into the coffee cup and reflect upon what lies beneath its murky depths, I'm taken first to the desk of a solitary author in the wee hours of a winter morning, prior to a long commute and a never-ending workday. He's seeking refuge in an upstairs bedroom turned into what he calls his writer's den in the Hamilton home he owns. There's only a half hour left in his quest of desperately compiling a collection to prove that he is a real writer, before he must pack up and get on with his day. That vision of a 34-year-old author then blurs as the scene shifts to a lonely writer about a dozen years before, in an Ottawa room that is in a bedroom, office, entertainment center, and refuge, where he writes with an unflinching passion and the restless fantasies of earning a living off his words before he heads off to work one of 3 part-time jobs. My mind's eye rewinds from there to an even younger self less than a decade earlier. A teen sitting alone in his bedroom in a small town, the only world he has yet known. A small mid-northern Ontario village with nearby Sudbury seeming like a sprawling metropolis to his inexperienced soul. He is composing tales at a desk and on a typewriter, both inherited from his mother, in the house that was also his mother's childhood home. His visions and dreams are grand indeed as he hunts and pecks for just the right word to plant on the page. This skinny and frail young dreamer and schemer has no idea of the road ahead and what the universe has in store. His imagination is fierce, but it can't comprehend what adventures lie on the many paths he'll one day take. I compose this now, at a desk in an upstairs bedroom, turned into what I call both my den and my home office, but also consider an entertainment center and both a refuge and a broadcast studio. I reflect that 20 haunting years are like the surface of my now cooling coffee, merely the gateway into a writer's 40 years of fingers on keyboard, pen balanced in hand, and black ink blood spilled on pages too numerous to count.
Interesting. Kind of a life summary combination there. One area that I want to make sure we cover today, maybe now is the time to just jump into it, and we'll pitch down the road.
Yeah.
Anatomy of an author photo. I think I saw that on your website, on your blog site. If I'm not sure, the blog
YouTube channel. Yeah.
The markleslie.blogspot.com. I guess you tried to portray Die Hard, and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
anyway, you kind of go into a little description there, and lead us through that, because I found that fascinating. And if our production engineer
Yeah.
can pick up the blog of on his
Of
website there that we have, that's one that I think is really interesting, because you went to a lot of trouble to look like uh, Die Hard
John
as
McClane. Yeah, John
the
McClane. Yeah, so that was a fun one. So this was for, so I did some movie trivia books as well, not macabre stuff, and I did Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and I also did, so Yippee Ki you know the rest. That was the name of the title of a book of trivia about Die Hard. And so what I wanted to do for it was, because on the author photo of the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is I had a picture of me reading a book that Del Griffith is reading, the same cover of the book that I had, which was trivia. So I thought, I want the author photo to convey my passion for this movie, because the people who are reading this are into it. And so I thought, instead of a standard author photo, and author photos are all about branding, and it's really important. You'll notice I'm wearing skulls, and I've got the skull behind me in the books. That's all part of the author branding. And maybe they're bringing up the image right now of the author photo. Yeah, so this is the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So there's John Candy in the airport, and there's me trying to look similar to his character with the same book cover, and I kind of explain what that's all about. And so that was just cheeky, and it was fun, and the people who got the book loved it. And so, but with John McClane in Die Hard, the Bruce Willis character, I thought, all right, let's do something similar. And so what I did is I'm going to show this up really, really high. This is me in the white T-shirt that he's known for, which is splattered in blood. He even does have a skull tattoo on the one arm, which you see in just a few brief shots. Instead of Nakatomi Plaza exploding in the background, I have the CN Tower, a landmark in downtown Toronto, and I've got some little explosions on the roof. I even went and bought a BB gun that looked similar to the gun he's holding, and I have the same look on my face as well that he has on the movie covers, or the posters for the movie. And then the other element you may recognize from memes from Die Hard is there's the scene where he's looking out the window at the cop friend that he's about to make friends with, and he says, "Welcome to the party, pal," after he throws the dead body out to get his attention on the car. And that's the broken glass to represent that. So what I was trying to express, or trying to help other writers with, was saying, okay, it's kind of a funny picture. Haha, this guy's pretending to be John McClane. But I wanted to show them all of the effort and care and attention to detail that went into this author photo. Yes, it's good for a quick laugh, but there's so many elements that go into it. It's like, for example, when we opened up the broadcast, the image of me staring at York and being philosophical. There's lots of author photos of me out in the field posing with my full-size skeleton, or posing with Barnaby. And I think it's really important for authors to consider what is the promise you're making to the reader, and can you express that in the author photo. So with my author photos for my books about macabre things, it's going to be me looking spooky and scary and wearing clothes that are sort of appropriate for the genre, with skeletons, whatever. When it's a book of fun trivia about a movie, I'm going to maybe want to look like one of the actors, so you recognize this is going to be fun. You're going to get some laughs, and you're going to get some interesting information. And then even on the other hand, because I wear many hats, on my books for writers, Wide for the Win and An Author's Guide to Working with Libraries and Bookstores, it's a picture of me in a business blazer or sports coat with a button-down shirt, looking professional. So again, the idea is that I'm getting information about the business of writing and publishing from somebody who has 35 years in the industry, but this person's serious, and he's gonna convey the content, and now in a friendly manner, because I'm smiling. I'm not looking too serious in the picture, so I'm friendly, but I'm also professional. Whereas the skeleton guy, and the other thing too is, sometimes when somebody sees that author photo, they know whether or not it's for them, right? There's going to be people who see, me in a skeleton thing with one hand screaming in the blood, and that's my bloody eye on the cover. That is something they're going to say, no, not my cup of tea. I would rather have a nice historical romance or whatever it is. And so you're doing the potential reader a favor by properly positioning your author photo, and making sure that the author photo for any particular genre or book you're putting out lines up with your brand that way.
Well, I'm part of that group that uses the same author photo for everything, but my books don't cross the same realm that yours do. But I understand.
Yeah,
That
but I mean, but we know what you look like, right? Like we can tell what you look like and stuff like that. But if you do bounce around, maybe it's just a different pose or a different look, right?
But I thought it was really important because I'm reading your stuff on your blogs and things back and forth, trying to make this a good show today and bring things up. And that's kind of really neat. And I said that's something that most of us don't think about, but we should think about it. And that's why I wanted you to talk about why you did what you did, because that may apply to half a dozen of us that really have those interesting genres where we can, in fact, adapt our personal looks in our author photo to give credence to the book that we're writing.
Yeah, yeah.
That you also have a consulting business where you help authors. Is that true?
Yeah. So what I do is, because I have all this experience in the industry, is if you go to markleslie.ca and you check under consulting, I work with authors. I'm actually a full-time writer and consultant. I don't actually do more than I do 20 hours a week as a consultant for Draft to Digital, which is a distributor of self-published books for authors. And they're a fine company. I love working with them, but all the rest of my time is dedicated to writing and just kind of working with coaching authors and helping them. So if you go to markleslie.ca and you look at the link for consulting, you'll see I'll do a 20-minute free one-on-one video session with any author who wants help. Because one of the things that frustrates me the most in our industry is there's so much information out there, but it's really hard to determine if this information is right for you, right? Like I may talk about the author brand at author photo, but that may not be right for you. So that's fine. Why waste your time with that, right? And so what I can do is in that 20 minutes, you can ask whatever questions we want. Maybe we look at what you're planning, what are your goals, what are you hoping to get out of this, and potentially help you narrow down the things that might be useful. And if I can save an author, who, from spending thousands of dollars on a service that they were interested in purchasing or whatever, by saying, oh, no, maybe before you do that, like before you spend all this money on marketing, what you really need to do is maybe you need to go back to the drawing board and let's look at your cover and make sure it's really on brand for what you're trying to do. Because if you spend more money on trying to get this to the audience, and I've made this mistake when I put out A Canadian Werewolf in New York, for the first 4 or 5 years, I had the wrong cover. So all the marketing money I spent was putting it in front of the wrong audience. How frustrating can that be? So that's why I want to offer the free consulting. I can't afford to do more than 20 minutes because guys got to eat too. But if you like what we can do in 20 minutes, then there's the option of booking a longer term. And it's $149 to do a one-on-one hour long. I have had some clients who wanted to do more long-term stuff. And so if it's a long-term stuff, first we do a 20-minute chat. We kind of get to know each other and see if this is going to work out well, like you should do with anyone you work with, like an editor or something like that. And then we look at a long-term plan and say, okay, so we're going to meet every 2 weeks for an hour. We're going to get here. And that's kind of a thing that I think we can work out. And then we look at, well, what would that actually be for this longer term project rather than charging you an hourly rate, which is a little bit more expensive.
So you're sort of an accountability partner, so to speak, with regard to, here's what we should be doing. You get back to me in a couple of weeks. Let's make sure you actually got that done. And then I can understand that part makes a lot of sense to me with regard to a longer term commitment, because sometimes you can answer a question. Okay, I got it done. And then all of a sudden, I need somebody to hold my hand just a little bit longer, not much, just a little bit.
Yeah.
So one of the mistakes I think, and again, you can add in there, is that we write our books as authors. We get the covers done, we get the publishing done, and then we start to think about the marketing. And in reality, when I have a new client and we go through a competitor analysis of what's out there, who's done what, et cetera, then I start saying, well, you need to start getting some of your material out there in the world. What could you suggest to new authors with regard to when they should start marketing, what they should market, where, et cetera, so that it helps them when their book is actually published?
So I really think an author needs to understand right from the beginning when they go to write a book, when they go to produce the book. And so if you're halfway through it or it's finished or whatever, before you start thinking marketing, let's step back and look at who this book is going to benefit. Who is this book for? With a nonfiction book on like how to tie your shoes, well, it's for people who want to learn how to tie their shoes. Okay, that's one aspect of it. But how am I going to approach tying shoes? Is my tying shoes going to be fun and frivolous? Is my tying shoes going to be a long, in-depth academic look at how to, the history of tying shoes and how to, perfect 50 different techniques? Or is it going to be a quick, fast, let's get in and get out because I'm busy and I want to tie my shoes? Because the reason I want to tie my shoes is I really want to be a good runner. And then that's the next phase of your career. So kind of understanding who your audience is important. A perfect example for me was when I wrote the book, The Canadian Mounted, which is the trivia guide for planes, trains, and automobiles. I very specifically thought this audience very, very narrow. So these are people like me who've watched the movie with John Candy and Steve Martin that came out in 1984 by John Hughes, who've watched this movie 50 or 100 times, who watch it at least once or twice a year, Canadian Thanksgiving and American Thanksgiving, and maybe at Christmas just for fun, because they love it so much. And the reason I went with the cover I went with is that cover is only going to be recognized by the true diehard fans of that movie. Most people look at the cover of The Canadian Mounted, and I'm just going to hold it up so you can see it. You look at the cover and you go, oh, no, wait, that's an adult sex book, right? That is not a book about a movie. But if you see that cover and you're a fan like I am of the movie, you know that's the book that Del Griffith or John Candy is reading when the two of them first meet in LaGuardia. And it was actually a pornographic novel, which is what it's described as in the script for the scene. And obviously a joke because John Candy was a Canadian actor. So me understanding the target audience, that this is not for everyone and that a lot of people are going to misunderstand it, was a calculated risk I took because I thought I only want it to be read by my core audience. And ironically, thinking about maybe there's a dozen people or 25 people in the world like me is weird because I've sold close to 4,000 copies of that book by narrowing in on the tightest audience I could think of, not thinking big.
We're almost at the end of the show, and I promise you some time to talk about how do people get in touch with you, how do they buy your books, anything going on. I know last night you said you had a beer and a book opening, so let's talk about how do people get in touch with you, and I'll give you the last minute or so here by yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. So people, you can get in touch with me, markleslie.ca. If you Google Mark Leslie author, you'll find me on all the various social media platforms. I love to connect with people. If you have questions or whatever, you can even message me. We can do a consult. I just released One Hand Screaming the entire month of October because people are more like me when they're celebrating Halloween. And last night we launched the book and the beer together. So we launched One Hand Screaming, and Counterpoint Brewing in Kitchener, Ontario launched a hoppy IPA beer with a single Citra hop that was pretty bitter and tough, and it's called One Hop Screaming. And that was just one of the things I wanted to do because working with a local business, supporting a local business, and the local business supporting me is the most amazing kind of collaboration. Because ultimately, books and reading and publishing and authors and readers, it's all about collaborating, and all we're looking for is something to connect one another with, whether it's a story, whether it's your book, or whether it's a really fine craft IPA beer that you can connect with others. That's really what writing and publishing is all about. And so that's why we had this really amazing event with so many great bookish people and beerish people all hanging out together and just celebrating the evening. So yeah, markleslie.ca. And I know if you're in Canada, I don't think they ship across the border, but anyone watching from Canada, you can order the beer online, and Graham over at Counterpoint Brewing will ship that to you. But I'm afraid for cross borders, it's not going to happen. But thank you so much for the opportunity, Red.
So for the audio audience that may be following us, it's Mark, M-A-R-K, Leslie, Leslie.ca. .com.ca. So MARKLESLIE.ca. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude today. Mark, thank you so very much. I really enjoyed particularly like we get together periodically, and I really enjoy your sense of humor and the value you add to the audience. So thank you so very much today, Mark. In just about 20 minutes, maybe a little less, I'm going to have a guy on here who is the #1 sales trainer and speaker in the world, has been for the last 4 years. Guy, I believe his last name is Pici, P-I-C-I. I'll find out how to pronounce it here shortly. But Joe is going to be joining us, and we're going to talk about a number of things with regard to sales and how do you actually get that customer that you want to buy your material. So with that, Red O'Loughlin on the Corner Bookstore on the USA Global TV and Radio Network, signing off for today, and look forward to seeing you here in the near future with another author, and we can just go anywhere we need to go. But with that, thank you very much. USA Global TV and Radio Network. Bye now.
Hello, I'm children's author Diane Floyd Bain, and I am co-host for several of the USA Global TV and radio shows. I joined because of the purpose of the USA Global TV and radio. They provide content for the viewers and listeners, an opportunity for people around the world to have their own show or even be a guest on an existing show. We truly believe in helping others get their positive message out to the world. We also have the opportunity for the listeners. You can watch on several platforms, and on YouTube, you can ask questions and even give a comment. We absolutely love it. I love being part of the USA Global TV and radio because I love positive messages, and who doesn't? And we need more of that in the world. We are a family, and we hope you will join us and become part of the family too.
Hello everyone, I'm Simon MacDonald. I live in the West Highlands of Scotland, a very beautiful part of the world. Seems a long way from the USA Global TV station. But remember, USA Global TV is worldwide. It's a fantastic platform. And every Wednesday, I come along here as part of the show of the United Kingdom, News and Culture. And it's just like a family reunion each time. It's one of these amazing stations that has such a beautiful, friendly, and intelligent atmosphere as well. And we reach out to an audience in the most unimaginable places. And I came here, I don't know, must be over a year ago now. I was introduced by Dr. Philip Chan, and I met Ian Plum-Turner and Helena Chard, who are co-presenters on the show. And then Diane Floyd Bain came along as well. And I mean, the five of us, Dr. Jacalyn, of course, who is our host and our mentor, has just made this show work so well. Tremendous people, lovely time we have, and we impart a lot of information, a lot of knowledge. Nothing's rehearsed. It's all done off the cuff, and it all just gels. And we get great feedback from people coming back and saying how they're enjoying the show. It's lovely to hear. It's lovely to get that interaction from outside as well. And we're all listeners, and some of us are elevated listeners as well. So we enjoy every second of it, and we hope you do too.